Today in the episode, alarms sound over potential nuclear tests by Russia and the U.S. The Russian dictator personally asked U.S. President Donald Trump to help with the war against Ukraine. Putin caught lying again. Oreshnik missile and nuclear bluffs exposed. The situation is alarming. This is how the Chief of Staff of the French Armed Forces, Fabien Mondon, commented on the possible nuclear weapons tests in Russia and the United States. The general appeared before the French Senate's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. He mentioned the recent Russian launches of the Poseidon and Burevestnik missiles, both capable of carrying nuclear warheads, and emphasized that such actions are a cause for concern for the planet.
The American president took note of this since he immediately announced the resumption of testing. In any case, he used a phrase that suggested the United States might resume nuclear tests. So, there is indeed a worrying atmosphere surrounding nuclear issues. We are seeing a level of rhetoric and aggression in both words and actions that is quite exceptional. Fabien Mondon, chief of the French Armed Forces staff, as quoted by Le Figaro.
On October 26th, the Russian dictator announced the testing of the Burevestnik cruise missile with a nuclear payload. The head of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, reported that the launch took place on October 21st, and the missile is capable of hitting targets at any distance. Russian dictator ordered preparations for the infrastructure necessary to deploy it. The following day, Donald Trump stated that the U.S. has the most powerful nuclear submarines off the coast of Russia and emphasized that the American side is also conducting nuclear tests. On October 29th, the head of the Kremlin spoke about the nuclear underwater drone Poseidon, claiming that there are nothing in the world can beat this technology. On the very same day, the President of the United States instructed the military to immediately begin nuclear weapons testing. By October 30th, Putin's press secretary, Peskov, hastened to assure that the tests of the Burevestnik and Poseidon were not nuclear. He said that the U.S. had misunderstood Putin's words. According to British Secretary of Defense John Healey, U.S. President Donald Trump can still force Russian dictator Putin to sit at the negotiating table. He also emphasized that Ukraine's coalition partners are constantly updating their joint strategy to ensure peace in Ukraine after the cessation of hostilities.
President Trump is the figure that can bring Putin to the table, that can potentially deliver an end to the fighting. The work of the coalition of the willing is being regularly refreshed so that we can genuinely feel we're ready at the point of peace, whenever that comes, to step in and help secure that. John Healey, Secretary of Defense of the United Kingdom, as quoted by Politico.
The Russian dictator personally asked U.S. President Donald Trump to help with the war against Ukraine, which Russia instigated 10 years ago with annexation of Crimea, but ever since has been unable to end it. The U.S. president shared this during a business forum in Miami. According to Trump, the conversation with Putin took place about 2 weeks ago. The American president noted that he had managed to resolve similar issues in an hour and claimed that it was done without any help from the United Nations.
President Putin, I spoke to him 2 weeks ago, and he said, on the one, he said, we've been trying to settle that war for 10 years. We weren't able to do it. You got to settle. I got some of these things settled in an hour. No help from the United Nations at all.
Germany plans to increase its financial assistance to Ukraine by approximately 3 billion euros in 2026, according to Reuters. A source in the German government revealed that the country intends to continue supporting Ukraine for as long as it might be necessary so as to resist Russian aggression. The funds will be used to purchase artillery, drones, armored vehicles, as well as to replace 2 Patriot missile defense systems. According to another source, Chancellor Friedrich Merz has approved these plans, and they are expected to be confirmed soon. It is worth noting that Germany remains the largest European provider of military aid to Ukraine, having sent about 40 billion euros since 2022. The 2026 budget includes an additional 8.5 billion euros in support. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reports the elimination of yet another 1,170 Russian soldiers in the past 24 hours. In addition, armored vehicles and 15 artillery systems were destroyed. Since the beginning of the large-scale invasion, the Russian military has lost a total of 1,147,740 soldiers, as well as 172 drones and 85 motorized and special vehicles were completely lost by the enemy. In total, 276 combat clashes on the front in the past day, according to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The hottest spot remains, obviously, the Pokrovsk direction, where Russian forces launched 100 assaults on Ukrainian defense positions. Measures are being taken to block enemy forces trying to infiltrate and set foot into the city of Pokrovsk. Active countermeasures are taken to prevent the attempts by enemy infantry to secure positions in the area. On the Kupiansk direction, 7 enemy attacks were recorded. On the southern Slobozhenщina direction, 14. On the Lyman direction, the enemy launched 27 attacks. On the Kostiantynivka direction, the enemy carried out 35 attacks. On the Alexandrivka direction, the defense forces repelled 31 enemy assault attempts. But it wasn't quiet deep in Russia this night either. Drones attacked Volgograd. A large fire broke out near the local oil refinery, according to Russian public sources. Explosions were also heard in the Kostroma region. A hydroelectric power station in the city of Volgorechsk was hit. The power station operates on 4 gas turbine units, one of which is the largest in the world, with a capacity of 1,200 megawatts. The plant provides electricity to a significant part of central Russia and the country's defense industry factories. Agents of Atesh, guerrilla group, conducted reconnaissance of a strategic oil depot in the Oryol region of Russia. This depot supplies 40% of the fuel for Russian army units on the Kharkiv and Kursk directions. Atesh reported that the Russians are trying to protect the site by deploying special anti-drone nets over the tanks. However, these precautionary measures are useless. The partisans already have the exact coordinates of all key facilities and their layout. All the information about the oil depot has been passed to the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Ukrainian forces are steadily depriving the enemy of the ability to launch missiles and drones at Ukraine. In the temporarily occupied Donetsk, the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, together with the Brigade Reconnaissance and the separate Special Forces Brigade Ptahi Magyara, Magyar Birds, destroyed a base for the storage, assembly, and launch of Shaheds. The operation took several months to plan, said Brigade Commander Robert Brovdy. Not all news is good. Last night, Russia once again attacked the railway infrastructure of communities near the front lines. This was reported by Ukraine's Vice Prime Minister for Reconstruction and Minister of Community and Territory Development, Alexei Kuleba. In the Kharkiv region, Russia attempted to disrupt the connection with the eastern part of the country. Trains were rerouted via alternative routes. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, the attacks targeted the railway's energy infrastructure and one of the stations. Due to damage to the Donetsk and Zaporizhia routes, trains are experiencing delays of up to 5 hours. Russia targets Ukraine's critical infrastructure, everything that guarantees people a peaceful and normal life. This was the reaction of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the new attacks by the aggressor country against Ukrainian cities. He called on partners to increase pressure on Moscow to finally force it to peace and end this war that has already lasted more than 1,350 days.
The fact that the Russians continue to target energy facilities and civilians once again shows that the pressure is not enough right now. It is very important for America, Europe, and the G7 to continue their sanctions and tariff work on Russian energy trade and finances. Moscow must finally realize Europe's seriousness about self-defense. The time has come to make a decision regarding Russia's frozen assets. The political will is already there, and we count on the swift implementation of the technical solution. It is absolutely just that the aggressor's money works to protect against his war. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
The Kremlin dictator Putin once again boasted about Russia's weapon developments. During the awards ceremony for the developers of the Burevestnik and Poseidon missile systems, he claimed that these missiles allegedly use only domestic materials. The Russian dictator also stated that new generations of weapons are already being developed based on nuclear technology like that of the Burevestnik. But what lies behind these statements? An actual threat or just another show? My colleagues will continue.
Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has once again been caught in a lie, and now it's about the so-called launch of Oreshnik production. Although Putin already announced this a year ago, reports the Center for Countering Disinformation. In November 2024, after a strike on Dnipro, Putin began regularly claiming the start of serial production of the Oreshnik missile complex. Oreshnik is a medium-range surface-to-surface ballistic missile. It can be launched with or without a nuclear warhead. It was supposed to be a development based on the Russian RS-26 Rubezh complex.
The center analyzed these statements and identified a contradiction in the rhetoric of the Russian dictator. He is announcing the start of Oreshnik production again, although he previously reported that it has been ongoing for a long time. Oreshnik is used as a tool of propaganda and intimidation, demonstrating Russia's lack of readiness for constructive dialogue. From a message by the Center for Countering Disinformation of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine on Telegram.
Putin also ordered the start of preparations for potential nuclear weapons tests after a corresponding decision by the United States. The Kremlin dictator made this announcement at a meeting of Russia's Security Council. Earlier, during his Asian tour on October 30th, Trump stated that he ordered the U.S. military to immediately resume the process of nuclear weapons testing. This statement was made after Kremlin leader Putin boasted about the alleged successful test of a new nuclear torpedo Poseidon. According to experts, Russia's rattling of nuclear weapons is another bluff. The Kremlin has no promising plans for new missiles. Oreshnik and Burevestnik are echoes of Soviet developments, and the testing of Burevestnik is questionable, as during flight, this missile leaves a radioactive trail, and there was no information about this. It could well have been an ordinary missile passed off as a wonder weapon.
Firstly, the missile comes out incredibly expensive. Secondly, it leaves a radioactive trail. And let's be honest, in modern war, as we see now with Ukraine's example, the longer a missile is in the air, the greater the chance it will be shot down. From that point of view, why does a missile need to fly 14,000 kilometers?
According to Putin, the development of Burevestnik and Poseidon missiles has historical significance for the entire 21st century. He claimed that Burevestnik allegedly surpasses all existing systems in the world in flight range, and Poseidon moves faster than any surface ships. Head of the Center for Countering Disinformation of Ukraine, Andriy Kovalenko, assessed Putin's statement as an attempt to artificially raise the stakes amid Russia's military defeats.
Putin is clearly following Khrushchev's script. Raising the stakes in nuclear tests is an imitation of the Cuban Missile Crisis. People who have studied Russia know that Putin always wanted to outdo Khrushchev and considered him a loser who lost to Kennedy. In the end, Putin will be a sub-Khrushchev. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the National Security and Defense Council's Center for Countering Disinformation, on Telegram.
Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump stated that American nuclear submarines are positioned near Russian borders. This means Putin's threats could backfire against him at any moment.
In reality, Russia has used everything it can against Ukraine except nuclear weapons. And nuclear weapons, this has been repeatedly discussed and written in the West and the East, have a hard barrier not only from NATO countries for Russia with strict warnings, but India and China have also drawn a red line against the use of nuclear weapons anywhere, including against Ukraine. From that point of view, all that remains is to boast about some old developments that, by the way, it's unclear if they were even used.
Putin also reported that this year, Russia will put the heavy intercontinental missile Sarmat on experimental combat duty, and next year on full combat duty. Every time facing international pressure, the Kremlin dictator resorts to his familiar tactic of scaring the West with some wonder weapon without analogs, but it never goes beyond threats. In reality, these statements are increasingly resembling a propaganda show. Reported by Victoria Chistiukina, UATV News.
That's all for today. Thank you for standing with Ukraine, and stay tuned for the next update.